Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I am joined by Greg, recruiting extraordinaire, also of Hail Varsity, and we are back on Zoom. Now, I'm going to just full transparency really quick. This is not necessarily permanent. This is just this week, but ideally, Greg and I would still like to be able to record in person. So if you're like, I liked that over the Zoom, or maybe you like Zoom more, I don't know. This is just a 1 week deal. We are done officially with football season. We are moving into football off season, but we have tons of other sports that are still happening right now, obviously recruiting. So let's get to it. Greg, first and foremost, how are you today?
I am well. It's weird. Yeah, you said that it's the off season, but I still feel as busy as I felt last week or the week before that. There's a lot happening, but I am very well. I'll be glad when we get some resolution one way or the other on a number of these things.
Yeah, that's okay. So let's just hop into that because you said getting a resolution. And one of those things is that the recruiting contact period. This is a big deal in 2021 because this is the first time since January of 2020 that coaches could go in for in-home visits. This has been a long time coming. Now, that doesn't mean that coaches haven't had contact and visits and official visits from recruits. There's been all of that. This is just now getting back into the traditional contact period where coaches can go in home, which those things had been limited because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we kind of look toward the early signing period, which is only weeks away, Greg, what are the Huskers hoping to accomplish during this time?
Yeah, I think it's varied. It's really interesting in a lot of different ways because I guess you can't talk about any of this without saying that Nebraska, down 4 offensive assistant coaches, is going to make this portion of recruiting extremely tricky. There's just no real way around it. So I think for at least for this first week, especially this coming weekend later in the week, you're going to see a lot of contact with current commits. So Nebraska has 9 current commitments. There's a handful on offense and then some on defense, in which Nebraska's going to get out and see them. Barrett Ruud has already been out to see Ernest Hausman as of the time that we're recording this. Gage Stinger is getting a visit as well from Barrett Ruud here in State out in Millard. And so Nebraska will definitely want to go and see those current recruits, but with a little bit of a twist. It gets more difficult to go and see the offensive recruits, right? Because except for tight end Chase Androff, who does expect a visit this week from Sean Beckton, you don't know who's coaching those players, right? And so you don't know whether or not, and this is a real dilemma, should Scott Frost send a defensive assistant just to say hello and make sure that they have some sort of presence? Or do you wait until you have a position coach in place to be able to visit that person? I think they're going to wait until they have a position coach, and then that coach can then also go in with Scott Frost, because one of the key things to remember in all of this, just to kind of refresh on the rules here, is that assistant coaches are allowed to go out each week to see recruits. So Ernest Hausman, for example, Barrett Ruud went to see him on Sunday. He can go back the following week, but Scott Frost is only allowed to visit them one time per this chunk of time, right? And so Scott Frost's visit gets saved because it's a bigger deal because he can only do it once. So I think that in the case of those offensive recruits, you'll see Scott Frost go with new position coaches, hopefully, when he has those in place.
Now, I will say one thing that has actually worked out in Nebraska's favor, at least in my opinion, through this whole thing. So, Greg, I'm curious what you think is one thing that we have talked a lot about is just the uncertainty of those 4, like you said, those 4 offensive positions and not knowing how to explain that to recruits, not knowing how to go into homes and talk to them about what the future is going to look like. Because until you know who that offensive coordinator is, you really don't know what depending on who is ultimately the person brought in, there's a number of ways that this offense could go, and that could change the type of quarterback you're looking for. It could change how the wide receivers are utilized. It could change the type of running game that Nebraska needs. So it could be something where a lot of these recruits are like you said, I don't really want to make a commitment until I know the person that's going to be ultimately deciding how this offense operates. However, with the amount of coaching changes that are currently underway, so Lincoln Riley just accepted the job at USC. Oklahoma is going to probably see some of their, I'm not saying Nebraska is going to go and take all of my point with that is not that necessarily Nebraska is going to go to Oklahoma and take its 5-star commits. It's that what Nebraska can do now is at least use the uncertainty elsewhere to talk about, hey, there might be uncertainty here, but it's not like you're not seeing uncertainty elsewhere now too. And that uncertainty probably benefits Nebraska now that they can point to, well, look at all these question marks here. You may be having them with us, but you're having them elsewhere. So it at least, it maybe doesn't give Nebraska, in my opinion, like a commitment sooner, but it actually, in my opinion, might hold some of those players longer, where they might be then available in the traditional signing period because they're having to wait because there's just so much uncertainty in college football in general.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that there are a lot of different, and I'm just as you were saying that, whether Indiana fired their offensive coordinator, or you have so many job openings in the Pac-12, like there's some still in the South, like there, like LSU obviously, and then other ones on down the line. And then, like we saw, like you mentioned, the Lincoln Riley situation, like we saw, like someone's going to fill those jobs. And so that will create other new openings and new ripple effects. So I think that because of all of that, it does create a situation where Nebraska can say, okay, maybe you're unsure about us and what's happening in our situation, but probably at least one of the other schools that you're considering, if you're talking to a new recruit, one of the schools that you're also considering is also going through some sort of changeover as well. So I do think that ends up helping. And it's just interesting because it feels like it's widespread in every conference. I don't feel like there's anywhere that you can say, oh yeah, the majority of those coaching situations is stable right now. Then that makes it so like wild, but also everyone is under the same time constraint in a way. And what I mean is everyone's trying to get this stuff figured out before December 15th, because that's when the early signing period is open, and people want to be able to sign those classes of the guys that they either have committed or the guys that they're now going to visit, like Frost and his staff are going to be doing here soon. So there's just a lot to kind of unpack in a very little bit of time.
It's going to be interesting. I think in most years, especially since the introduction of the early signing period, we've really looked at that as being the day. Those 3 days are going to be when majority of classes are signed. Now that probably still remains the case for schools that are pretty settled as far as its staff. But I mean, even when you look at like the uncertainty around, say, someone like Lane Kiffin, and does he stay at Ole Miss or does he go elsewhere? There's just a lot of question marks. So it feels like, because of the question marks that are so big right now, they're so big. They're not maybe an offensive coordinator or maybe a position coach here or there. It is like major coaches potentially moving to new programs, similar to Lincoln Riley. It might actually make the traditional recruiting period might be getting
It's getting its boost.
it's
It's time
getting
to
its
shine.
day back.
Okay.
So it'll be an interesting, I don't think when we started talking about this recruiting class that we would have had any idea that this is the reality of like how wild the just everything going on in college football is this year. I don't think that changes much as far as Nebraska is still going to be leaning heavily on the transfer portal, still leaning heavily on graduate transfers, because I think that's just from everything Scott Frost has said where he's really leaning going into 2022. But still, it might just mean for this small recruiting class that Nebraska, if the Huskers play their cards right, some of these players may be available to continue recruiting toward that traditional day, which was probably not going to be the case 2 months ago.
Yeah, and it also, which would be really interesting to see how that plays out, because on one hand, if you're Scott Frost, you could say, hey, if you wait until later to make your decision and give us more time to continue to get to know you and build that relationship, it could work out for us. But on the other hand, there's also other schools that are probably saying that as well, right? As like just pick Washington, for example, as just a random example, as they try and figure out who their next coach is going to be. They also probably want people to wait until they get a full staff in. So it kind of goes both ways, because you could also see if like Nebraska ends up having their full group of assistant coaches here over the next week, they could have a strong pitch to say, no, go ahead and sign with us. You kind of know what we are now, especially if they've already had contact with players. Like, it can go both ways. Like, I could really see that going either way. Both of those scenarios, though, are wild. It will make for a lot of different news and activity.
It's gonna be interesting to watch. And if you want to know more about this topic or just get some more of Greg's thoughts on it, you can head to the Recruiting Notebook tonight, 6 p.m. Central at hailvarsity.com. The Recruiting Notebook goes live Sunday through Thursday, 6 p.m. Central. Obviously when there isn't a holiday, but a lot of these topics are going to get more and more important as we get closer to December 15th. So head on over to hailvarsity.com, bookmark the Recruiting Notebook. Again, this topic, Greg will go further into it this evening. So if you want to just have a deeper dive, be sure to check that out. Now, if you are somebody who's like, I want to stay on top of all of this recruiting news, a lot of this falls behind our premium content. We have a lot of really good recruiting premium content at hailvarsity.com, but it requires a subscription. So if you're somebody who's like, I'd like a subscription, what can you do? If you're watching this today, Monday, Cyber Monday, head to hailvarsity.com. Here's the thing. You can either head to one of our social channels. It'll be linked either there, or it'll also be in the post of this video at hailvarsity.com. You can get a year subscription, which includes all of that premium content on the website, so you can stay up to date with everything that Greg has coming in the next couple of months. But you also get the magazine, which includes the yearbook every year, which is a really awesome double, triple, however large the yearbook is, preview for Nebraska football. But that is only $9.99. So you get your first year for only $9.99, which is an incredible deal because you're saving $20. So head to hailvarsity.com, take advantage of that deal. It's going to expire today on Monday. So if you're watching this, don't wait, go get this. Now, if you're watching this like next Monday, there will be future deals.
Right. Keep your eyes out in the future.
But this is our best deal ever, so go take advantage of it. Greg, thank you so much for your time, your expertise. We will be talking next week. So if you have questions, comments, tweet them at Greg Smith HV. You can also tweet them at Hail Varsity. You can leave them in the comments of this video. But we do appreciate you always chiming in with your thoughts, comments, questions. Greg, thank you as always.
Well, thank you.